All right, so welcome to another deep dive. It's Wednesday, March 26th, 2025, and today we're doing things a little differently. We're going to be looking at some English class notes.
Interesting.
Yeah, specifically from a student, Joao Diniz. These are from February 24th, 2025. So you can think of this as us teachers here at Academia BSB helping you, our listeners, understand some of the key concepts in English.
Right. And we're also kind of helping Joao along the way, right? Getting
Yeah.
him ready for his English exams.
Exactly. And his notes are, they're really quite comprehensive. He's got vocabulary building, pronunciation guidance, language usage, idiomatic expressions, grammar, reading, writing, listening, speaking training.
Wow, he's really covering all the bases.
He is. And the theme of the lesson, this particular set of notes, was on reading. So that's where we're going to start our deep dive today.
Makes sense. It's a good place to start. I think reading comprehension really ties into all those other areas he's studying.
For sure. So the first reading passage in Joel's notes is titled, What are Human Rights? And this seems to be an introduction to, just the basic idea of what human rights are and why they're important kind of universally.
Yeah, it's a really important topic. And the language of human rights pops up in a lot of different areas. So yeah, getting a good grasp of it is really key.
So let's jump into some of the vocabulary that Joel pulled out from this section. The first word is inherent. That's hunt. So what does inherent really mean in this context?
So inherent basically means something that's a natural part of something else. Like a quality or characteristic that can't be separated from it. It's essential to it. So when we say human rights are inherent, what we're saying is everyone has them simply because they're human. It's not something that's, given by governments or laws. It's just part of being human.
So it's not something you can earn or lose. It's there from the start.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes it clear. Another word he highlighted is intrinsic. So that's pronounced trinsec. Now, are intrinsic and inherent, are they basically the same thing? Can you use them interchangeably?
Yeah, they are really similar, and you often can use them interchangeably. I mean, they both mean belonging to the essential nature of something. But I'd say maybe inherent puts a bit more emphasis on the idea that it's a quality you're born with, like a natural attribute.
Okay.
Whereas intrinsic can be a bit broader, maybe referring to the fundamental nature or worth of something. Like you could say the value of human life is intrinsic. It means it's valuable in and of itself.
Interesting. So there's a slight nuance there.
Yeah, a subtle difference.
Okay, now let's look at a grammar point from this first reading. Joao's notes mentioned this sentence. The newly formed United Nations decided to put these rights in writing. And he's got a note here saying newly formed modifying United Nations. So can you explain how that works grammatically?
Sure. So newly formed is what we call an adjective phrase, and it comes before the noun it describes, United Nations. So we call this a pre-modifying adjective phrase. It basically gives us more specific information about which United Nations we're talking about. It's not just any UN, it's the one that was recently formed.
Right, right.
And this is really common in English. It's a way to be concise and add important details directly to the noun.
Yeah, it just creates a clearer picture in fewer words.
Exactly.
Now, in the language use section, Jean's got a note about the phrase entitled to. The reading says we are entitled to certain rights. What exactly does that signify?
Okay. When you're entitled to something, it means you have a right to it, like it's something you deserve or that you have a claim to.
Okay.
And in the case of human rights, it stresses that these rights aren't privileges. They're not things that can be taken away or given.
Right.
They are things that belong to everyone.
Yeah.
And you'll hear this phrase in other contexts too, like if someone returns a faulty product, they might be entitled to a refund.
Okay, so it's a pretty versatile phrase.
It is.
Okay, so let's move on to some of the key points that Joe highlighted from the What Are Human Rights reading itself. He notes that every country protects certain rights and freedoms for its citizens.
Right. That's an important starting point. I mean, the specific rights might differ from country to country, but the idea that governments should protect certain basic freedoms is pretty universal.
Yeah, okay. He also points out the creation of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, or the UDHR, which was drafted in Paris in 1948.
Yes. That was a landmark event. It was right after World War II, and there was this global push to establish universal standards for how people should be treated.
Right.
And the fact that representatives from so many different countries were involved in drafting, it gives it a lot of weight, a lot of moral authority.
It really shows that there was a worldwide consensus on the importance of human rights.
Exactly.
Okay, so the UDHR, it contains 30 articles.
That's right.
And these articles explain rights that are inherent to all human beings.
And just to emphasize, this idea of universality is really key.
Yeah.
These rights aren't just for certain people or certain countries. They're meant for everyone, everywhere.
Okay, so going through some of the specific articles, Joao notes that Article 1 states, all people are born free and equal.
Right.
And Article 2 says no one should be discriminated against based on things like their race, religion, language, or gender.
Those are pretty fundamental, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, those are definitely cornerstones of the whole human rights framework. Article 1 establishes equality as a principle, and then Article 2 kind of builds on that by prohibiting discrimination.
Yeah, it's like setting the foundation for everything that comes after.
Exactly. And then Article 3, which Joao also mentions, establishes the right to life, liberty, and security.
Yeah, those are seen as the most basic rights, I think. I mean, without those, you can't really enjoy any other rights.
Right. So the right to be alive, to be free, and to feel safe.
Absolutely. Those are essential.
Okay. And the reading also touches on other rights, like freedom from slavery and torture, protection from arbitrary arrest, the right to education, the right to medical care.
Right. So it gives you a sense of the scope of the UDHR. You know, it covers civil and political rights, but also economic, social, and cultural rights. It's about ensuring human dignity in all aspects of life.
It's pretty comprehensive. And you know what's really interesting? Noted that the UDHR has been translated into over 500 languages.
Wow, that's amazing.
And it's available online for free. So it's really accessible to people all over the world.
That's fantastic. It really shows the global commitment to these principles. I mean, making it available to everyone, regardless of their language, that's a huge statement.
It is. And to wrap up the key points from this reading, he mentions that the UN has set goals for countries to protect these rights, and that the aim is to create a better, safer, more just world for everyone.
And that's the ultimate goal, right?
Yeah.
To translate these principles into action, to create a world where everyone's rights are respected.
It's a work in progress, but it's a goal worth striving for. All right, let's move on to the second reading passage in Joanne's notes, which is titled WH Questions. And this is about, using those question words in English to get specific information.
Ah, yes, WH questions. They're so basic, but so important for being able to communicate effectively in English.
Absolutely. You need to be able to ask for specific details and understand the answers you get.
Right.
So Joao has listed each WH word, and I think it would be helpful to go through them one by one, just to refresh our memories on their pronunciation and what kind of information they help us get. So first up is when.
Okay.
Pronounce when. And this obviously asks about time. So the example he gives is, when is your birthday?
Right. So when is used to ask about a specific point in time, a date, a duration, anything related to time.
Okay. Next, we have who, pronounced whoage, which asks about a person. The example is, who is your teacher?
So we use who when we want to identify an individual or a group of people.
Okay. Then there's where, pronounced where, which asks about location. The example is, where do you live?
Where helps us figure out the location or position of something.
All right. Now we've got what and which. What is pronounced WT and which is pronounced wets.
Okay.
These ask about a thing or when there's a choice involved.
Right.
The examples are, what is your favorite color? And which book do you want? Is there a difference between when you would use what versus which?
Yeah, there is. It's a subtle difference, but it's important. So what is generally used when there are lots of possible answers or when the options are open-ended? Like, what do you want to eat? There are tons of possibilities there. But we use which when there's a limited set of options or when we're asking someone to choose between specific things.
Okay.
Like if you're holding two books, you might ask, which book do you want?
Right. So the context helps determine whether it's what or which.
Exactly.
Okay. Next up is why, pronounced wait. This asks for a reason. So the example is, why are you late?
Why helps us understand the cause or the motivation behind something.
Okay. And finally, we have how, pronounced hand.
Yeah.
This asks about the manner or the way something is done. The example is, how do you study English?
Right. And how is really versatile because you can combine it with other words to ask all sorts of specific questions.
Yeah, and Shaun's notes actually go into some of those specific how questions.
Okay.
So the first one is, how much, pronounced ham bin? This asks about price or an uncountable quantity or even the degree of something.
Right.
So some examples are, how much is this book for price?
Yeah.
How much money do you have? for quantity, and how much patience do you have for degree. It's interesting how one phrase can have so many applications.
It is. And the reason how much works in all these cases is because it's used with nouns that we don't usually count individually.
Okay.
Like liquids, powders, or abstract concepts like patience or time. You wouldn't say how many waters, you'd say how much water.
Right.
It's about the overall amount rather than the number of individual units.
And this actually ties into a grammar point that Joan noted down, which is the difference between countable and uncountable nouns when using much and many.
Ah, yes. That's a classic English grammar rule. So, much, as we just said, is used with uncountable nouns.
Right.
These are things we think of as a whole, not as individual items.
Okay.
Like rice, information, happiness. We don't say one rice or two informations or three happinesses.
Those would sound really strange.
Exactly. But many is used with countable nouns. So things that we can count as separate items.
Okay.
Apples, ideas, children. So we would ask how many apples, how many ideas, how many children.
Right, that makes sense. So knowing whether a noun is countable or uncountable is important for forming grammatically correct questions and sentences.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, the next specific how question that Joao mentions is how many, pronounced hyamini, which, as we just discussed, refers to countable quantities. The example is, how many books do you have?
Right. Books are countable, so we use many.
Exactly. Then we have how far, pronounced ha passer, which asks about distance.
Okay.
The example is, how far is your school from home?
How far specifically asks about the physical space between 2 points.
Right. And then the last one in this section is how long, pronounced ha-ha, which refers to duration, a period of time.
Okay.
The example is, how long is the movie?
So how long is used when we want to know the length of something in time?
Exactly. And Diniz also notes under language use that long itself can be used in different ways. It doesn't always refer to time. It can also refer to the physical length of something.
Ah, that's a good point. We have to pay attention to the context. So how long usually refers to duration, but long as an adjective can describe the physical dimension of something.
Right.
Like you could say, that's a long table, referring to its length, not how long it's been around.
Right. That makes sense. Okay, let's move on to the third and final reading passage in Joao's notes for this lesson. This one's titled, Being a Sportsman. And this passage seems to be a more personal reflection on how playing sports, specifically tennis, taught the writer certain skills that they were later able to apply to other areas of their life, like engineering.
I like that. It shows that the lessons we learn in one area can often be transferred and be beneficial in other seemingly unrelated areas.
Absolutely.
Like there are a lot of parallels between sports and other fields.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So the vocabulary section for this reading has some interesting words.
Okay.
The first one is debut, pronounced fakjuzar. What does debut mean?
Debut basically means a first public appearance or performance. So if we're talking about a musician's debut album, it's their first album. If we're talking about an actor's debut performance, it's their first time acting on stage or on screen.
Right. So in this case, the writer's tennis debut in 9th grade would be their first time playing tennis competitively at that level.
Exactly. It's their introduction to that world.
Okay. The next word is arena, pronounced tortoisephilis. Now, usually we think of an arena as a place where sporting events are held.
That's right. It's usually a large enclosed space with seating for spectators. But in this passage, I think the writer is using arena more metaphorically.
Okay.
Like they're talking about an engineering competition and they refer to it as an arena. So they're suggesting that it has a similar atmosphere to a sporting arena.
Right. That sense of competition and pressure and maybe even excitement.
Exactly.
Okay. We also have the word atmosphere, pronounced Agedis home fair. And this can refer to the air around us, but it can also refer to the feeling or mood of a place.
Right. So it can be both literal and figurative.
Yeah.
In this case, I think the writer is talking about the figurative meaning.
Right.
Like they're describing the atmosphere of the engineering competition, and they probably mean the feeling of tension or excitement or pressure that was present in that environment.
Yeah, it's about the overall mood, the vibe of the place.
Exactly.
Okay, the word expectations is also listed, pronounced seiksbesti.
Expectations are basically what people believe or anticipate will happen. So if there are high expectations for a project, it means people are expecting it to be very successful.
Right, so in this passage, the writer is talking about the expectations surrounding the engineering project and how that added to the pressure they were feeling.
Yeah, I can imagine that would be pretty nerve-wracking, especially if you're debuting in that arena.
Absolutely. And the final vocabulary word from this section is cautious, pronounced cautious.
To be cautious means to be careful, to be wary, to try to avoid potential dangers or mistakes. So if you're walking on a slippery surface, you might walk cautiously to avoid falling.
Right. So in this passage, the writer mentions being cautious while working on the engineering project, which highlights the importance of planning and careful execution.
Yeah, in engineering, precision and attention to detail are crucial.
Absolutely. Okay, moving on to grammar in this passage. Joao's notes point out an error in the sentence. The judges says, I was precise. He notes that says should be said. Why is that?
This is a simple case of verb tense agreement.
Okay.
The sentence is talking about something that happened in the past, which is indicated by the phrase, I was precise. So we need to use the past tense of the verb say, which is said.
Right, so the correct sentence would be, the judges said I was precise.
Exactly. It's important to keep our tenses consistent throughout a sentence or a paragraph.
Definitely. It can get confusing if the tenses are all over the place.
Absolutely.
All right, finally, let's look at the language use in this passage. Joao notes that the writer uses a lot of personal pronouns like my, I, me, and his. What effect does this have on the tone of the writing?
Well, using those personal pronouns makes the writing feel very personal and reflective.
Okay.
It's like the writer is sharing their own thoughts and experiences directly with the reader.
Right.
And it really emphasizes the individual perspective, you know? The writer is making a personal connection between their experiences in sports and in engineering.
Yeah, it creates a sense of intimacy.
Exactly.
And Joao also specifically points out the possessive pronoun his in the last paragraph, where the writer refers to his jersey.
Ah, yes. That's an interesting detail.
Yeah. What do you make of that?
I think it's a powerful image to end with.
Okay.
The jersey represents the writer's identity as a sportsman, and it also represents all the things they learned through playing tennis. Discipline, focus, perseverance. And by mentioning his jersey in the context of approaching a new challenge, I think the writer is suggesting that they're carrying those qualities with them, that they're applying what they learned in sports to other areas of their life.
Right. It's like a symbol of the transferal skills that we talked about earlier.
Exactly.
It brings the whole narrative full circle.
It does. It's a really nice touch.
So today we covered a lot from Joao's reading section. We talked about human rights, WH questions, and the transferable skills we learned from experiences like sports. And for Joao, revisiting these vocabulary words, understanding the grammar points, and seeing how language is used effectively in these passages, it's all great preparation for his English exams.
It is. These are the building blocks of language proficiency.
Absolutely. And before we wrap up, I want to leave you with a thought-provoking question.
Okay.
Thinking back to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, with all the rights that it outlines, what is one right that you, our listener, believe is most critical for creating a truly just and fair society today? And what are some of the challenges in upholding that right globally?
That's a really good question. It requires us to think critically about the values we hold dear and how we can work together to make those values a reality for everyone.
Exactly. It's something to ponder. And with that, we conclude our deep dive into the reading section of Joao Diniz's English class notes. Remember, here at Academia BSB, our motto is, it's not only about the language, it's all about communication.
Well said.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.